I want you to tell us how big Convergence is, what's the size. So I know you're 145 crore, you did 20 crore of net profit last year, but if you could just share with them what NDTV Convergence is in terms of traffic, revenue, etc. Just the basic lay of the land, as I said.
Sure. So, our revenue was 144 crores last year. We are profitable, which is very rare for online content, even rarer for news. If I can just say that our North Star is the user. It always has been. And I think that our branding in particular has been very clear from the start. Our branding is that we stand for accurate news, that we stand for the fastest news. Our newsroom, or actually our Convergence team, is about 300 people. Convergence, as it now exists, launched in about 2008. And in 2009, we decided, this team, Arijit, Kavaljit and I, blessed by the group, of course, that we would really take Convergence and scale it up. There were different reasons for doing that. We knew that the southern audience in particular had a great affinity with NDTV, the brand. With English, with NDTV, and as we were making our plans to scale up, it so happened that the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh at the time, YSR, died in a tragic and very dramatic helicopter crash. And it just so happened that in the weeks before that is when we had been planning our rollout for this dramatic inflection point for Convergence. And so it was really around that we sort of unveiled the new website at the time. And it worked. We were feeding non-stop information. And I think at the time our television channels may not have gone as big on that story as the website did. In terms of the group, I think that about 4 years ago, and you've looked this up, NDTV was the first broadcast group to say that we will put digital at the heart of all our operations. And that has really served us well, both in terms of strategy, synergy, revenue, everything else. And we now see, you all see, I hope, other broadcasters playing catch up in that game. So we made that move very early on. What that means basically is that we said everything would be web first, digital first. All our resources, all our efforts, everything had to be broken online first. And television, in a sense, would come second. On how we design the Convergence experience, like I said, everything is designed around the user, without compromises. Because we believe that if you have good content and a superlative user experience, the money will follow. And just before I come back to you, Vinita, we've always thought of Convergence as having 3 pillars: content, technology, and UI. And without any of these working in perfect synchronicity with each other, I don't think the overall cumulative experience would be as powerful. So as an example, when the 2014 election results came out, we had over 13 billion hits on our website. And we didn't go down, not for 1 second. And that is because of the brilliance of our technology team and its platforms. And that's what I mean when I say that our content would not be able to withstand other pressures if technology and design weren't backing it 100%.
Lovely. I meant to say this at the beginning and I forgot, honestly, that in 1988, Pranoy started with this thing of World This Week on Doordarshan. I don't know how many of you remember this. How many people in this room have seen Doordarshan? Okay, including me. And he is in many ways called the father of private news industry in this country, which he is. And it is, I find it prophetic and very nice that a company that his company has seeded becomes a reasonably decent-sized online property. But one thing, What is NDTV Convergence without NDTV? I mean, if I was to put the overheads of NDTV News and the content that goes there, would its balance sheet look different? How much? And secondly, and part of this question is, how much the verticals? Because a whole lot of the valuation and the exciting part which happened, I think, a couple of years back when you were raising money, there was a lot of excitement around gadget, around, you know, your design, the retail website.
Indian notes at the time.
Yeah. And so how much of it is the vertical in terms of both traffic and revenue? And what kind of influence in terms of, again, traffic and revenue does NDTV, the television part, have?
So I think that a good way to think of it is that NDTV.com is not NDTV247.com. So we were very clear from the beginning when designing the website and what its purpose was, is that this is not a replica of our television channel. I think a broadcast audience has very different needs and interests than what an online audience has. So if you look at our website or our app, I'm sure more of you use the app than the website during the day. The headlines and the display, the priority is very different from what our television channels have.
Let's do this. How many people use the NDTV app?
Yeesh. That's a bit disastrous and worrying for us, so I'll have to speak to the rest of you after this.
Okay.
But anyhow, so, we were very clear that the audience and its needs of online are very different than what broadcast is. So that's one. And we have a completely separate team of journalists and a completely separate newsroom that handles our online properties than our television room does. And so NDTV 24/7, for example, or our Hindi channel, is one of our news sources. NDTV Convergence has about 300 employees. Our English news desk for NDTV Convergence is about 25 people. And they write, edit, curate copy from scratch. What we pick up from 24/7 very heavily, of course, is video. And you asked about financials. There is an arrangement. We are a listed company. We pay for that content at arm's length. It's an arm's length transaction. So if you were to remove that and to put in, let's say, another video source, which we paid for, our financials would largely look still the same.
Would the traffic be the same?
Well, we believe that NDTV 24/7 is the best news channel, so I think our traffic depends largely on, for video on that. I can see Mehul and Shawneel smiling, so I think you agree with me on that. So the point is this, that Convergence is a standalone entity which has built up its own strengths, leveraging from the mothership. Now, you brought up our verticals, and, we are lucky enough to own NDTV Gadgets 360, which is the world's 7th largest gadget site, which is, a huge thing. It's bigger than TechCrunch, etc. And it uses television not in the least. So it creates its own video. It doesn't use, the television show. In fact, it is the TV show that leverages and licenses the online branding because it recognizes the value that the online property has. So in many ways, NDTV flipped around everything, like I said 4 years ago. NDTV Convergence, or NDTV.com, is the world's 20th biggest news site, bigger than HuffPost, bigger than the Washington Post. So it is very much a standalone entity with its own power and its own audience.
Fantastic. What gets you, so the reason I was asking about the verticals versus news is also what gets you stickiness, what gets most engagement?
Sure.
And what gets I know you don't want me to ask about CPM, but what gets you better results on monetization? Because we were discussing earlier about, how Indian publishers don't manage to cluster the inventory very well by premium, non-premium, mass, non-mass, specialized. So how does it work for NDTV? Where does a lot of our traffic come from in better monetization?
I think our, online, our news is unmatched, and I can say that with some amount of objectivity. The quality of our writing, the pace at which we roll out the news, and I hear this, from the competition. I hear this from, influencers who use our app. The fact is that we are very much the best best at the news online, especially for politics. And we've always been clear that that is NDTV's branding and its corner to own, and we're very, very territorial about that. All our efforts are thrown at that, and you will see that this year as well, leading up to 2019. It is a big year for India in terms of elections and politics, and all our resources, all our efforts will be thrown at that. So I think one of the things is just from a very, very strong branding around that. We don't compromise on that. The second thing is user experience, like I said. So the best practices, our ads, when, obviously we run a lot of ads, but the close button, how quickly it pops up, the fact that we will not throw 70 ads at you when you land on our page, when we have ads on autoplay, the way that those are designed, how much those are tested, the actual design, the UI of the entire website. These are things that count. Our top scroll will not have Bollywood news, no matter how engaging it may be for a certain kind of audience. That's not our audience. We do Bollywood news, but it comes lower down in our website. We have never subscribed to what we think of as prurient content, so we won't do women in bikinis or that kind of stuff. That's just not for us. And I think that those kind of things command a premium. So like I said, we don't compromise on those issues, and I think that creates stickiness. We have advertising deals that prove that those command a premium. So it's not just us saying it.
So its news is highest in the food chain in terms of traffic and premiumness both? Is that fair to say? And then the verticals would come? Then
yeah,
would it be gadgets?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Okay.
Very much so.
Yeah. And I remember 2 years back, and please, audience, feel free to now come in with questions. If there are questions, please raise your hand so that I can pass the mic around. One sec. There was something here. No, okay. 2 years back, when I was looking at the company, your Convergence had a better value. I think its valuation was twice that of the broadcast entity, if I remember correctly. I mean, don't hold me to it. But what is Convergence looking like now? And I remember that there was this whole talk about demerging the two companies so that better value is released. And I found it very interesting that a digital company should be demerged out of a traditional media company and get... So where are we right now on that? Is there something you can share there?
There isn't actually. We continue to, hold all our options for different reasons. Right now, we're keeping things together. So, our financials are available. As far as growth goes, you mentioned valuation. We're managing to hit, big numbers in terms of growth on a very large base for both traffic and for revenue. There are certain very large revenue deals that we have, which we continue to renew, which competitors don't have. Some of them are one of a kind. I can't disclose too much information, but in the first half of next month, we will be launching a product which marries the strength of broadcast and digital in a way that has not been done anywhere in India, and I would venture to say in the world. So do look out for that again. It's going to be related to phones. And again, when you see that product, I think if you remember this conversation, it will explain why we are keeping broadcast and digital together for now, because it allows us to synergize the strengths of both. So there are reasons why we're not doing that right now.
What works? I mean, you've talked about the quality of editorial, etc. But if I was to ask you, and you've spent a long time with NDTV, if I was to ask you what, and looking at the landscape of Indian online publishing, if there are one or two things you want to pick out, if like lessons others could learn from you, what works, and what's the big challenge?
I think best practices work. Like if we look at it, we often look at it and say, would I read this? Would I use this? And I find it somewhat frustrating that even in today's day and age, there are there are large, very, very large publishers that refuse to do things like credit other websites. So when we quote somebody else's information, we will not say a leading English newspaper. We will say what that newspaper is, its name, and we will give a hyperlink to it, And this, it seems crazy, does it not, to be in this day and age and to still not be doing that. And I think that somewhere users, advertisers, the community picks up on this stuff and sees it as antiquated and petty. That's just beneath a large brand. So to follow best practices, things like that, hyperlinking, crediting, we're pretty strong on social media. I think one of the challenges, you asked about challenges, is to somehow as publishers keep our cool in dealing with social media, It moves at such unforgiving speed. But I read a nice phrase the other day about do not capitulate to online fury because it is incessant. And so sometimes we see stuff and, people will take screenshots of you made a mistake and you did this and you did that. Yes, people make mistakes. And the thing to do when, your team has made a mistake is to apologize for that mistake and to know that, people will move on. Hopefully it's not a gigantic mistake and it will not be repeated. But sometimes this thing about, social media and the trolling and the online stuff of it,
It dominates our thinking too much.
Yes,
I sometimes find that
exactly.
if I read a newspaper, I read all this on a Twitter trend line yesterday.
Sure.
So what have the newspaper reporters done? I always wonder. All they did was sit in their armchair and looked at the Twitter feed yesterday. Because all these 12 things, which I'm reading in the front page of national newspapers, was there on the Twitter feed.
Well, I think that, social media is phenomenal in terms of the pace at which it delivers inputs and, helps break news so often now. And, you get pictures and tip-offs and all those kind of things. But, so many people get caught up in, now we have to react because so-and-so said this about us on social media. And actually, you don't always have to react. Like I said, if we've made a mistake, we must apologize for it quickly after determining the facts. But otherwise, too much bandwidth is spent on that. Let's just focus on content. And sometimes I would like for our online, for our social media accounts to have a little bit of personality. But the problem with that is that you can then go too far.
I think you guys have too much personality, so I don't think you need to worry there. But speaking of social media, how much of your traffic is organic versus, search and social related? And, where are you on that whole question? Because that's our next panel also.
Sure. So we're very, very lucky because, NDTV.com has such high recall that a lot of our traffic comes, from just directly. But yes, we've benefited from, social. We're very strong on SEO. And, for us, Twitter and Facebook are, not hugely important in terms of
percentages?
traffic. Yeah, no.
Okay. Yeah.
Direct is very important for us too.
Yeah, Srini?
Hi. Pranay and his content has always been seen as premium.
Benchmark.
So it's been always benchmarked at that level. You guys have done so well on the digital space. Do you have any plans of going pay, or at least some part of it going pay?
Please
Sorry,
do.
do you have any what?
Do you have plans of going pay? I'm saying
No,
please
no.
do, please do.
No, we don't right now. We don't think that the market is ready for it. We don't think it will be for a while. It's come up every now and then. We've never actually toyed with it seriously, to be honest. It's not for us right now. And luckily, our numbers show that advertising and other forms, of ancillary revenue are keeping us going. So it's not something we're looking at.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rahul from Hindustan Times.
Hi.
Just now you spoke about a product wherein you would be marrying the content of television and digital. Just wanted to check, while coming up with a product like this, how are you going to probably manage a concept like digital rights? What is your plan of action around it?
So I'm just going to correct you there. I said we'll be marrying the strengths of broadcast and digital. It's not content. This content will be totally created for this product. We're committed to that. And so therefore the IPR, etc., will be clearly owned by this product. So I think IPR and, things like that are so important right now. And Convergence is, like, Vinita said, a separate company. And so we've always been clear from the beginning, contractually, everything is laid out very, very separately and cleanly.
I'll take a last question from there and then we are done. Yeah. Yeah, this gentleman.
Hi, my name is Laksh. I run a storytelling platform for millennials and stuff. So my question is about the delivery of the news. So the news, primarily to me, as a consumer, exists to give perspective and context to information, right? But because of social media and the internet and everyone being on their phones, news can come directly way faster from the source that is creating the content, as in the politicians and everyone else. And you have to match the speed of the information happening as it's happening. How do you then have, with your team and everyone, create the standard like you already have discussed a little bit, that we're going to take this much time to create the perspective. We need to create some space between the information happening and us delivering it with our perspective and context.
Sure. So I think that basically two things on that. One is that, there's basic practices which all publishers use. So you have a breaking news alert, which gives you just one line. And then we have what we call a first push. So one paragraph goes up. And then we get into, and then that's where the skill and the agility of the news team comes in, where they can crank out a 300-word solid story, which gives you all the facts. So you're getting the news, in stages. But really what makes it all worthwhile in the end for the user is they got the breaking news alert, and then they will come to us for the longer piece because of the credibility of the piece. And so in an age where there's information from a Twitter user who's posting that information to 100 publishers, what will really make your content stand out is credibility. And that's what we rely very heavily on and leverage on and try to build, really. It's a relationship of trust.